Well, this is the Yikong 4106 Pro. We looked at this a while ago, and this is the 4107 recently released. Now, I'm pretty sure we're going to find they're the same car, aside from the body, but maybe not. I can tell you this. As much as I'm not a huge fan of these weird frosted windows, and there's an interior in there, but you couldn't see it, they've fixed that now. I do quite like Japanese cars, and being in Australia, we have a lot of those on the road, patrols and Land Cruisers in particular. This is a very interesting model because we don't actually see a lot of this ever anywhere, this kind of body. I'm looking forward to seeing if it is actually the same underneath as the 4106. I do have a full review of that, but now that I have more familiarity with all its little bells and whistles, particularly that tank turn, I thought it might still be interesting to have a look at it. So let's do that, and we'll see what we can see. Let's do it. Now, this guy's been out for a little while now, and one thing about the Yikong crawlers is that their value for money seems to be quite good. Notwithstanding that they're using these little Hyrax knockoff tires, which I think they had on the last ones too. When you buy a crawler, you want one for your purposes. Are you going to be doing a lot of trailing, wet driving, actual rock crawling? What is it that you want from it? Can it tow? Can it carry extra stuff? Can you put a driver in it? All these things are good to know. Do you want to upgrade it later? Does it come with room for upgrades, and does it come with a radio that will allow it? It's got a lock nut that you can lose if you're not careful. Worst case, you can replace it with standard hardware. We do have quite a complicated light kit in here, which I'm not complaining about, and I like also that it's modular. With the light controller at the back there, you've got a bunch of plugs that come off it, and a single cable that goes down into the radio, which is designed to work with this. And you've got decent LEDs in the front for the headlights, so they're going to actually be fairly bright. And a light bar on top. I'm quite happy about that. Now, as much as we have a lot of lighting going on in here, even 3 pairs of LEDs in the back, but that's the body. With an interior, it's actually quite nice. On the back, we've got a little containery thing that's probably quite difficult to undo. I remember having some trouble with it the other day when I was having a fiddle with this car. Anyway, given how difficult this is to undo, it's going to be largely cosmetic, but yeah. Look, it's a hollow container and you can put who knows what in there. But you can put stuff in there. Now, it doesn't have a spare wheel. The 4106 does have a spare wheel. What I'm interested in seeing today is whether the internals have changed. I have a feeling they're the same. And look, the original car actually worked quite well. So the wiring was tidier on the 4106, but we otherwise have similar setup. I do notice that this servo is different. We've got a 3225 mg, that's a 25 kilo servo, and I think it might be the same for steering. Let me just look underneath and see here. There's a metal servo arm, but there's no identifying part on that servo. I'm pretty sure this one did have identifying marks on it. 3115 mg. So that means it's a 15 kilo steering servo and a 25 kilo tank turn servo. I do wonder whether that was on purpose or not, because you'd think you'd want the stronger servo in the front. Anyway, they're still interestingly composite frames. Now you might look at that and go, ew, plastic frames, what do I want that for? Well, they don't weigh much. They're not conductive, which is nice for short circuits. If you've ever had something come into contact with your steel C chassis rail that shouldn't be in contact with your steel C chassis rail, you'll know about it. The other thing I wanted to mention was these servo size is actually not typical. It's a size that, well, look, it is typical, but it's not typically used these days. It used to be. This is what mini servos used to be commonly found as, and the Cross RC models also use this size. They're a little bit bigger than the TRX4 servo, so the Power HD TR4 and the JX servo, all the little small ones that we like that are quite strong these days, they're a size below this. So replacing these servos might be a little bit annoying. The only real difference I see here between the two is, aside from those servos, is we've got red JST connectors there, and they're using a different JST style on this guy. That's neither here nor there. Look, even the wheels are the same. They just have red versus white bands on them. Just a quick rundown of features. We've got a full lighting system in both. We also have this interesting tank turn feature, which we'll get to, but when it's engaged, it actually has real disc brakes on each side. They're cable actuated. It's got a little lever that pulls the clamp in and shuts actually on discs in here. So there's a rotor and there are actual calipers in there. There are portal axles in both. Again, they are the same in every way, including the panhard on the rear, which was present on that. So underneath, you know what, rather than telling you, I'll show you. All the way down to the undercarriage, this is the same car. I was hoping to see something different, but in a way, I'm also happy that they're not. I actually quite like the suspension. The drive shafts are plenty strong. Oh, I see there's no waterproof boot on the switch, whereas that one had it. That's your on-off switch down there. The axles are actually quite scale looking and quite attractive, aside from the portals. On a Mercedes I can understand, but it's kind of a shame to see them on the Patrol. I wish they'd done a straight axle. Not complaining, just noting. Now the other thing to let you know about on this guy was it didn't come with a front bumper installed. You had to cut this whole thing off and then stick one on that it included, but it wasn't installed. This guy has the bumper at each end ready to go, but one difference is you've got a tow hitch receiver ready. This guy did not have that. They both have roof racks and they both have their own version of light bars. And any version other than the very first run, which those of us who buy first run of things seem to get punished sometimes with early iterations, they have clear windows, not this frosted stuff, because there is a full interior in both. So at this point, before we go any deeper, if you like the 4106 and 4107 from Yikong, buy based on the body that you prefer. As pretty as the box is, I see nothing on it about actual branding. So it's likely this is an homage, or a homage as we say in Australia, to the original design. Now it comes with a bunch of features that are on the box. It's easy enough to show you through them anyway. Before I put this away, the last thing I'll mention is there are no sliders. This was all one big polycarbonate thing. If you wanted sliders aftermarket, would be your only way to go. This guy actually comes with sliders, and they're not only some plastic rail, but they're actually scale-looking bar work. And you'd see a car on the road that looks similar to this with one small difference. Okay, so let me take you through the features on this thing, top to bottom. Power on the back, 4 AA's in this radio, quite comfy, decent feel to it. I quite like these radios. The power switch is on the bottom. It doesn't have a waterproof glove, but it doesn't really matter if it gets wet. It does matter if it gets mud in it, because once you get mud into an electrical contact, it can fail to switch like it should. Okay, so we've got a light switch here. At the moment, everything's off, but you probably still have turn signals. Yeah, you do. That's front and rear turn signals. The other thing I'll note is it did come with some tools, but like a box wrench and a piece of plastic. I don't understand what that piece of plastic is for. I looked at it a few times and I haven't worked it out yet, but it's a little plastic bracket. Yeah, I don't know what that's for. There is a jumper as well. Quick look at this tells me you can put a jumper on to set forward reverse, forward brake and forward brake reverse, and by default it is just forward reverse. So that's your default. That's what the jumper's for. What I might do is just keep this off now. I've talked about lights real quickly. We've got aluminium body, plastic at each end suspension, shocks rather, and I would say, like out of the box, the preload is completely removed, so there's no preload on it. There's still it sits a little bit firmly and high for my liking. What follows now is just my critical eye on the car, not a complaint. And remember, this is about as cheap a model as you'll get that gives you all the features. So my criticisms now are just going to be more for your benefit. I actually quite like the car. That's the spoiler out of the way. But I haven't test driven it yet. It does have some sag on it, but with no preload on these fairly long shocks, I would like to see it sit down fairly far. I find these springs are a little bit stiffer than I like. If they're a bit softer and it's set like that, great. Then you could tune it however you liked with preload, which is the thumb screws on the suspension. Can't do that, not a huge deal, but just noting it. As far as the radio system goes, it's a Dumbo RC radio system with some dials that I don't recognize. I haven't seen them before, and as far as I can tell, everything's on. They do nothing. We've got a standard Hobbywing 1060 looking ESC in there, and you've got the Dumbo RC receiver and light controller in the car itself. Now, there are 3 servos in here, plus this tank turn guy, plus the steering one. Let me show you what they do. So I said this 3-position switch is actually for lights. So there are the lights on, by the way. And quite pretty. And look what happens when you first turn it on. Even though they're, that's actually how my HIDs come on my car, high intensity discharge. But LEDs usually would just turn on straight away. But anyway, that's that. Tail lights only come on when you're on maximum light. Oh, there is a reverse light. Look at that. So when you're going slowly, no reverse. And when you're going a bit faster, there you go. There's reverse. Now you'll also notice, interestingly, that there's a bit of disparity in these axles in the rear one. It is actually a fairly firm diff. The front one's a bit easier, but the back one doesn't spin very easily. I wonder if that's a function of what oil's in there or whatnot. You can lock it, I think. There you go. So you don't have to guess. Now it's currently got diff lock on, rear diff lock. And front diff lock is the one on the left. We turn diff lock off on both ends and reverse to shape. There you go. So that's no diff lock and that's diff lock. So you see the difference, right? Now, tank turn's interesting. Tank turn is channel 9, I believe, and you won't see it in action. This is sitting over the servo, but I'm going to leave it because that's how it came. Maybe I'll do this. There you go. So now that tank turn's on, which is button press 9, you'll see this guy moves in conjunction with the steering. When it's off, it doesn't. Here's tank turn on. There you go. So it's actually quite a difference, and it works in reverse as well. Now if I have tank turn off, quite a lot of extra turning involved, so there you have it. Now there's mixing on this radio too, because as you might be able to imagine, if you have rear diff lock engaged, all right, when you turn tank turn on, that's not going to work because it can't clamp the inside. It'll just be running against itself. Good news is though, it disables diff lock when you press tank turn. Now when you press tank turn again, it doesn't re-engage diff lock. So just keep that in mind. You can keep the front locked all the time and it'll be fine. That's not affected by tank turn at all. But it's just the rear one that when you turn tank turn on, so it's locked, and then it's unlocked. So that's just built-in mixing. There's also high and low speed. Hang on, Craig. Why don't we shut it? All right, I'm going to lock these so that so that you can see what's going on. Right, wheels are locked. I believe that's high, and that's low. That's low and quite controllable. We're on 2S. Now we're in high. It's still actually quite controllable, but you've got to be a bit more careful. So we've got diff lock on top, lights, high and low speed, and tank turn. This bottom guy does nothing, channel 10, and these dials do nothing. The good news there is you can have a winch or two if you want on this radio. You can have anything else you like on this radio too, because you have the spare channels. I'm quite a fan of that. That's your high-low servo and the diff locks. Oh, one last thing. Both cars have this, and it's kind of a servo saver, but it's also kind of a silly design. That's this thing here. It's like a damper on steering. There is a place for steering dampers, but not really on rock crawlers. Motorcycles, road bikes especially, no, all motorcycles actually can benefit from it, especially high speed ones, because you can get a tank slap if you hit the throttle too hard and the thing can just start wobbling. This will help counteract that. But on a rock crawler, if I'm steering, I want the wheels to go where I'm steering. I don't want to have built-in resistance on this, and it's actually not tunable as far as I know. So on the drag link, I'd be looking to replace that with a standard, just a standard link. That might be worth doing. As far as the length goes, ball end to ball end, it is, while I'm doing this, the geometry is quite good. The drag link is just about parallel to the pan hard, which is what you want. And the servo, okay, so there is one small issue with the geometry here. It's 99 mil. It could just be 100 mil link. Let's say 100 mil. It's more likely to be 100. Ball end to ball end is 100 mil link. So if you want to replace that, you just need a 100 mil link. Now, when you're setting up geometry, and I've done that with various cars of mine as well, you want the drag link to be parallel with the pan hard, which they've roughly got right. You also want the servo mount point to be behind the axle ideally. The reason you want that is because that seems to be the combination that minimizes bump steer. Note how, as the suspension cycles, the wheels turn that way as they go down. Doesn't matter a huge deal, and independently it only happens on the right-hand side of the car. The left isn't too bad, but when the right comes down, the wheels steer. If this servo mount point was further back, ideally just back and above the axle, but a bit behind it, that would give you a better result. The crawler I'm developing, and I'm back to work on that if you've been wondering, that's got very nearly zero bump steer because I've paid attention to basic design principles. This thing doesn't, but again, for what you pay for, it's a very cheap car. I have a 2200 milliamp hour 2S battery in there. I decided to go 2S because I think 3S is probably excessive. You know, probably not meant to hang it off that. Let's, 7 pounds exactly, or 3.2 kilos. So it's not the heaviest of cars that we've had, but it's certainly, it's getting up there in heft. I'm pretty sure I mentioned this, but the only thing it came with was these tools. A mostly empty sticker sheet because they've been applied, and the radio, that's it. So look, you get what you pay for, and in this case, I'm glad they've chosen to put everything they can into the car. Oh, one thing I'll remind you too, when I got the 4106, one of the servos failed out of the box, one of the little servos, and I haven't replaced it. What I did was I swapped it around and I made it so that the front was always locked, and on a trail car or a crawler, having the front always locked is actually just fine. It's the rear where the action happens. I often unlock on a comp crawler, or even just when I'm rock crawling if it's got lockers. TRX4 is a good example of this. You unlock and it lets it steer, especially when it's trying to climb a rock. Having an unlocked rear is actually quite helpful. Tank turn obviously is more helpful again. It's kind of like a soft dig. In the motoring world, Matt from Scale Builders Guild, he told me that this is called a cutting brake. And people in motorsports have known about this for a long time. I don't have a motorsports background. I do have a nerdy toy obsession crawling background, but I didn't know they were called cutting brakes until I did my last video. Right, I think I've yammered on for enough. The camera tells me it's been 25 minutes already. I'll cut it down a bit for you so that you don't have to watch all of my rambling. Right, let's get this thing on the rocks and we'll see what we think of it. Let's go. Right, well, this is first speed. It's actually a little slower than walking speed. And then second speed. Second speed is faster than walking speed, which I'm happy about. Right then, without further ado, lights on, first speed, both lockers engaged. This, my friends, is problem one. Now these Hyrax clone tyres aren't often very good, and they wear in and they get a bit better. But when they're new, I find they're not particularly grippy. So don't be too dismayed when this car struggles. I'll remind you that the 4106, I think, only managed one problem, this one, and I don't think it made it any further. Yeah, first is really nice and low. I quite like first gear on this car. Steering could be sharper. If you're new to my channel, this is my 6 problem course. I'm not trying to make this car look bad at all. I'm warning you now that it's not going to do particularly well. The reason for the 6 problem course is that I now have a consistent place where I can, let's try a tank turn here. I have a consistent place where I can test cars. So tank turn's on. She's actually pretty well balanced. Now, I'll just turn tank turn off because I need that thing to roll back. No, it's not going to do it. Now we're going to lock again because I want that wheel to grip for me. There we go. Now tank turn. And it's going to unlock the rear and pivot. There we go. So technology actually got us through there. I don't need this car to do well. This is problem 2, and we're locked without tank turn. What I want from this car is just to see how well can it crawl out of the box. And that is intended to give you an idea of how well it can crawl, so that if you're considering this car, you now know what to expect. Not all cars are made equally, and my 6 problems here, or 6 obstacles, are designed to test a bunch of things. Right now we're testing a steep entry with a transition to being all twisted up. Problem 1, of course, tested side hilling and breakover. Now, several of these problems test several different things, and there's a bit of overlap. That's also intentional because different chassis, different wheelbases, different tyres, it all adds up to cars that have different abilities. And your local terrain is going to vary, and your rocks are going to vary. So it doesn't really mean that my findings here should be taken as gospel. They just are an indication that's hopefully consistent. It lets you compare pretty much every other thing, because I compare almost every model available. Or I've got one from every family as far as I can think. Most manufacturers, I don't think, there aren't many manufacturers I've missed, put it that way. If you look over my channel, I have 6 problems footage. Now I'm having trouble getting this thing over. I'm actually going to tank turn briefly because I'd like it to pivot without losing my position. You see that? I could bring the nose around without losing the car's position. Now I'm finding steering really needs more throw in it. I want tank turn again because the nose keeps falling down. The back was pushing it too much. We're actually going to use tank turn, and I think it's going to help. Look at that. It really did. Now I couldn't do this with the diffs unlocked, and I couldn't do this with them locked. Tank turn actually got us there. Now this is risky. I'm going to reverse and hope tank turn stops us from losing our position, which it is. Look at that. See that? So tank turn's actually working. And now tank turn's also serving to lock, well, hold. It doesn't fully lock it, but it holds the inside. So that actually is surprisingly useful for crawling. With the help of this cutting brake, we've done 1 and 2. So right now the cutting brake is active and the front diff lock is active. This is problem 3. This one has a nasty hole behind it. I'm actually going to leave tank turn engaged. I'm quite liking it. Both wheels can turn on the rear when you're not steering. It's only when you start to steer that it clamps the inside wheel, the inside being the inside of the radius. So you'll see that I'm steering right, so the rear right is being braked. We might just go back to lockers because I need some forward momentum here as I steer. I'll tell you one thing that I'm discovering with tank turn, oh, that wasn't meant to happen, is the stability it grants. It's surprisingly good. So I can modulate it just by steering. I've got tank turn back on right now. What I really want is for the front to fall down towards us. Gosh, this is interesting. Tank turn is still active currently. This is a line not many crawlers can take, and I wonder if this thing will, nah. So we're bottoming out. Let me see if I've got a finger on the screen. We're bottoming out just in there on the skid. And I see the drive shaft was copying it a bit too. Oh, here we go, This will do it. Now I've still got tank turn active. I'm going to actually keep my finger on the throttle a little bit so I don't lose my position. Now diff lock's engaged. I'm actually going back to tank turn because we felt that I reckon this car can do problem 3. It got so close, I think it deserves another shot. All right. Man, it looks good. It looks just like a Patrol. I love this. Come on. There we go. All right. I tell you what, I'm a big fan of this cutting brake. It's like an instant dig. I love it. I think I like it more than being able to lock and unlock, actually. That's quite a thing. Come on. We've come so close to finishing it. Tank turns off, but the rear diff's just open now. It seems to be something of a limited slip, but not really. Locking it. Now I think this is where we were before. Tank turn, back engaged. There we go. There we go. Locking. Oh! Do we try again? I don't like to stretch it out on these videos, but this could actually just be me not getting the line, because this is a 3-part. All right, let's do it. Okay, we're locked front and rear. We need to get the front over first. Then to get the car into the position we need, the car needs to then fall over here. Then we go to tank turn, and then we can massage our way around. See how it doesn't let it go backwards? And then with a little bit of care, I think then we go to lockers again, don't we? This is like a multi-step process, this. Did I turn it off? I'm in full sun here. There we go. No, we need tank turn. Here we go. This might actually be as far as we can get it. Okay, 3's out, but by a whisker. This is problem 4, and I've got tank turn engaged. I'm going to leave it engaged because this is very interesting. I know, we're going to disengage it, go to lockers. Sometimes you just need a little bit more traction, and tank turn kind of robs you of traction if you're just going straight. The other thing I'll note is that without a center diff, almost all crawlers behave as if they have center diff lock engaged. It's not something that's mentioned often, but like my 100 series Land Cruiser, which is now old technology, it's 2001 model, it has a central electronic locker. And my 80 series, when you engage four-wheel drive, it basically was open. So you have to manually lock those front hubs, and that was it. So there is the advantage in these cars that they've got a locked center diff, so to speak, which means you've got 50% of power output at all times going to each axle. Now I was steering then, and the damper put its spring into that. I'm actually not finding the dampers too much in the way, honestly. This now is the part that's going to be challenging for it, to get from where the front wheels are now to get, like here's front rear wheels, I need them to go to the next one, and that's actually really challenging, because what happens is the sliders and the skid in this case get caught, and unless you maintain that middle line, you're in trouble. I'm going to cutting brakes real quickly. That's the tank turn, because I want to reverse without losing my position. There we go. We're going to turn them off and go back to lockers now. The end of this problem is here on the lattice. Now getting across from where we are now to the next one is a big problem, because it'll almost always bottom out. And we've got 4.53 inch tyres. Is that what I saw on the sidewall? Yeah, whatever it is. They're smaller tyres, but they're also portal axles. So we do have some clearance that straight axles wouldn't give us. That's quite attractive, you know. I might get my thumbnail. That looks quite good. The lighting's not ideal, but I think we've got a thumbnail there. Right, the question is, with all this technology, you kind of need to learn to drive fresh when you've got a new thing like this. We looked at the Challenger Pro recently. That thing had a sway bar that could be turned on and off, and that changed how I drove. I tell you what, this plus the detachable sway bar would be interesting. Now, many cars would have fallen here. See the damper's doing its thing. I see a metal servo horn there too. That's nice to see. Come on. It's likely we're going to fall, but I'm giving it a go. Now we're going to go to tank turn, just on the off chance we don't fall. No. I'm tempted just to give it one more go, just because it's close. This is like problem 3, so this makes for a longer video, I'm sorry, but I want to give it a fair shake. Like I said earlier in the video, 32 turn 550 motor, which is an interesting combo. Now we're going to lose the nose here. Tank turn is on. I just don't want to fall backwards much. There we go. So the other reason for using tank turn or unlocking the rear diff, you see how the other side's working and this side isn't, is that sometimes you don't want the rear to push the whole thing forward and just nose into some position you don't want. Let's just say it fours out, but we're going to go back to where we were and just bang it into second. Well, of course you lose your drag brake straight away because it's just a WP 1060, but speed, if I'd committed, speed can make all the difference. Anyway, we're back into second. Let's take it to the next one. Oh look, both the hazards are flashing. What causes that, I wonder? Lockers are on. It's kind of fitting that the hazards are flashing given the nature of the driving we're doing right now. Ooh. Oh, they're universal axles in the front too, by the way, which is what caused that rattling. That means you can get greater angle out of them. There's a bit of shake, but their unis are definitely preferable. Quick camera position change. I reckon we'll get this. Are we in first? Yeah, we are. I want cutting brakes on here. If I didn't, the nose would have pushed towards us, which we don't want. Now, even with open dips, as long as you've got all 4 wheels on the ground, you'll have forward traction. I did most of the Victorian high country here without diff lock in my 80, even some of the famous tracks. Like all of them actually, you can do a lot without diff lock. Right, there we go, that's 5, piece of cake actually. So given this thing has lockers, it can't really be overstated just how much more epic diff lock makes an off-road vehicle. Traction is king, and now the tyres, let's have a quick look at that. I think the tyre is biting. Yeah, it is. The tyre was biting on the body. I can't really recreate it now, but it was. Anyway, it got around. Yeah, traction is king. So to have lockers, I mean, you've got a full-time center locker even if you haven't got engaged diff locks. So you already have a pretty decent off-road vehicle. We expect a lot from these scale models, and like I said at the start, I don't need any truck to finish these 6 problems. If a crawler can finish any of them, you know you have a fairly capable off-road vehicle. Just saying. I will say on 2S, the modulation I'm feeling, the control I feel from this motor is very good. And I haven't experienced servo fade. Gee, this feels like we're in second. No, we're not. Oh, I think we were, and it just wasn't shifting. It just felt too fast. I had it changed to first, but it didn't shift, but now it's in. Nope, nope, nope. Saw that happening in slow motion. Well, I'll tell you what, these tyres, maybe it's the compound, I don't know exactly what it is, but they're very good. They're better than I thought they'd be. They're better than most cloned Hyraxes are. Like I said in my last video with the Challenger Pro, I'm not a fan of clones, but come on, thank you, come. But these are, for what they are, they're very, very good. Now, I've got too much forward momentum once we get up here. No, we're going to lose it again. We're actually resting on the bumper right now. Cutting brakes are now on. I want less forward momentum from that rear. I want the fronts to do the dragging. So as I steer, the left and right tyres are alternating. And when I want full forward, I can just release the steering and I'll have it. Well, the gears are strong. It's got sealed bearings throughout, by the way, and metal gears throughout. It's made pretty sturdily. I don't mind that it's got a plastic chassis and plastic bumper and sliders, because that means you've got flexibility that we didn't have. Ooh, now here's a problem. We no longer have full drive to the car. Something has broken. And I think it's this front fella here. Let's have a look. Okay, diff lock is currently engaged. I'll disengage it. Engaged, disengaged. This needs a screw that goes down in both of these, and oh, it's got it, it's just come loose. So the grub screw on that has come loose. The locker is still working just fine, but this cable sleeve needs tightening. That's all that is. This video is brought to you by my channel members, the Scratch Build guys. Here they are. Thank you so much, guys, for your regular support. You can find more about that in the description. My sincere thanks to everyone who supports me, but thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Throw me a like if this is useful to you. What's my verdict on this car? Well, look, it's got some minor issues with finish, and it has a puzzling design with the servo, the big one being on that and the small one being on the steering. I don't like the 100mm dampened drag link, but otherwise, I'm actually a huge fan of this car. Now, if you look at how much this thing can be had for, I got this from AliExpress. I try and do an Amazon link if I can, because I don't really use Amazon here in Australia, but if you do in America, which is where most of you are watching from, that would be the place to get this thing, particularly with the tariffs now coming on things from China. But I will see what I can do as far as getting you a link for a reasonably priced model. We pay a lot for our cars in Australia. Not a complaint, just an observation. This can be had for under 500 Australian dollars in Australia. That's an amazingly cheap price. That's cheaper than almost anything. TRX4 is nearly $1,000 for reference. A lot of the SCX-10.3s are about $1,000 for reference. So half of that for all of this? Come on. That's pretty darn good. Now, the ESC is approaching hot. Motor's approaching hot. Servo's warm, Little tiny 2200 2S battery, which will give you plenty of runtime. 2S will give you more than 3S, and I'd suggest 2S is good for the electronics in this car. And it's certainly faster than walking speed in second and slower than walking in first. Nicely geared for crawling. All round, this is a brilliant car. Someone in the comments who's more well-read than I am on this car will be able to tell you why. It's got hazards that are on. They started while I was driving. It could be some combination of buttons. I tried to work it out, I couldn't. But that's actually fine with me. I don't mind hazards for crawling, and in fact, I don't mind if they're always blinking. They don't really bother me. I like the decent headlights. I like the light bar. There is a lot to like on this car, isn't there? Running gear is actually quite solid. We abused this thing pretty hard just then. There are some scratches, but look, one other benefit of having this plastic composite chassis rail, which is integrated with the skid, by the way, is that the whole thing slides very nicely. Yes, it's not a lovely smooth thing, and some people like to have like a plate under there. You could build that out of a styrene sheet, honestly, but this actually slides just fine. And my issues were with the nut, with the screw in the front of that, of the transmission. They're getting caught a little bit. That's a bit of a stopper, but the rest of it's not a big deal. The bottom of these rod ends were also copying it a bit. I noticed the drive shaft in the rear was also copying it a little bit, especially on the back there. Yeah, look at that. So it's that part is fairly exposed. Back of the diff has a lip on it as well. That could be smoother. So they've got a lovely smooth profile. Oh no, they don't. They're slightly different from the originals. The originals were smoother, which is odd. But yeah, the shafts on both ends actually, they've copped a lot of rock. So just be aware of that. But look, the rest of the car, I can't complain. And for the money again, whoa, very good. Stick 4.19s on this and you're ready to enter scale 1 in WRCCA competition. you may just do all right. You're allowed to use cutting brakes and diff lock. I'm actually tempted to drive this stock next weekend at our local comp, our first one for the year. I might just do that, in fact. It's surprisingly good, yeah. Well, there you go. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like to see with this car. I'll just finish by saying this one did a lot better than the 4106 on the same rocks. It is the middle of summer and it's already approaching 100 out here, and it's still only just midday now. We're going to have a hot afternoon, and it's not even as hot as it has been recently. But hot rock means more grip, and if I did the 4106 in winter, which I may have done, or at least autumn, cold rocks make a difference. So that could be related to performance here. But yes, I found the cutting brake to be really useful. And again, you've got a bunch of spare channels here. You've got this fella, and you've got these two here. Really good. There's a lot to like in this car, and the money, whew, it's great. The only thing you don't want to lose is this little guy for when you open it up. Easy to lose when you're out and about, but thankfully it's just a standard screw. If you do lose it, you just lose the thumb screw part, but otherwise, yeah, quite good. Anyway, that's it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time on RC-TNT.